Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hello and welcome to another AIA Canada webinar. I am Jeff Champagne. I'm going to be your host for today's second webinar on our latest research on consumer behavior. And this time, we're focusing on electric vehicle maintenance and repair, a very hot topic indeed. But before we begin, I'd like to take this time to acknowledge our sponsors for this entire research project, including today's webinar. It is with your generous support that we can continue to offer members insights and knowledge. And so very much from all of us at AIA Canada, thank you for your continued support. So for presenting the results for today, I have joining me, first off is Rick Nadeau. He's the president of Quorus Consulting, who led this research on behalf of AIA Canada, and is going to be presenting his findings. So hello and welcome back, Rick.
Good afternoon, Jean-François. Happy to be part of another installment of the Consumer Behavior Series. Looking forward to sharing some nuggets around this new hot topic, hearing opinions from EV owners.
Yeah, that's great. And also joining us today is David Giles. He is the president of Powered EV Training and Consulting. He's also a very well-known expert on EV in Canada, and he's joining us today to provide his own analysis and perspective on these results. So welcome, David. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
So the format for today is that we're going to cover the content of the report in 3 sections. So for each section, Rick's going to present the results. David will provide some commentary, and then we're going to have a short Q&A before moving to the next section. Then at the end, we're going to have an open Q&A to cover other generic topics on the report and EVs. First off, I'd like to thank you. Some of you submitted questions in advance, and this is great, but we also encourage you to submit questions live through the QA tab on Zoom, and we're going to do our best to get to all of them. I know we already got a lot of questions, but again, we'll do our efforts to catch all of them. And so without further ado, I'll turn it back to Rick to introduce and present the first segment. Rick?
Perfect. Thank you for setting that up, JF. So first of all, folks, before we actually sink our teeth into any research findings, important for everybody on the webinar today to understand where these numbers came from. So just a quick side note here on methodology. So first of all, these results are coming from just shy of 2,100 online interviews completed with vehicle owners. You'll see throughout our webinar here, we did slice and dice the numbers so that we could see the results from electric vehicle owners, compare those to hybrid vehicle owners, and then to ICE or ICE vehicle owners. In terms of sample size there, just roughly 160 EV owners completed this survey, about 140 hybrid vehicle owners, and the rest, or roughly 1,800, were ICE or ICE vehicle owners. The results are in fact fairly what I would consider fresh, hot off the press, data being collected from mid-February of this year to mid-March of this year. So now that the boring part is done, let's have a look at some of the survey findings. The first theme that we're going to be looking at, as JF indicated here, are just general attitudes and behaviors regarding maintenance and repair. So important to kind of get a general sense of, well, how do vehicle owners actually feel about maintenance and repair, and are there any actually noticeable differences between EV owners, hybrid vehicle owners, and ICE vehicle owners? The first of our 4 slides in this section touches on, well, how knowledgeable do vehicle owners actually feel they are about maintenance and repair? You see the results here up on the slide for folks. The participants were asked to rate their level of knowledge on a 4-point scale. You see that scale at the bottom, and if we look at the proportion who are very and somewhat knowledgeable, the results are pretty comparable there across EV, hybrid, and non-electric vehicle owners or ICE vehicle owners. There's a slight increase there among EV owners in terms of feeling that they are very knowledgeable. But by and large, fairly similar results there from across the vehicle owner types. So some confidence, a little bit of confidence there around their knowledge around vehicle M&R. The next slide, what we wanted to explore here, is the extent to which vehicle owners feel they stay on top of everything. If we have a lot of A lot of techs, a lot of service managers attending our webinar today. Maybe you feel differently about how these vehicle owners actually do stay on top of everything. But this is, of course, we're getting the consumer's view, right? So by and large, results are pretty similar. It doesn't matter what kind of vehicle they're owning. Most of them seem to feel that they stay on top of everything there, ranging from 60 to 66%, with most of the other people saying, they're fairly attentive to what their car needs, but they do let some stuff slide from time to time. The third slide then helps us understand, considering the amount of effort, the question's right there on the right-hand side, by the way, folks, considering the amount of effort and costs involved, generally, how easy or difficult is it for you to manage the maintenance and repair of your vehicle? Interesting here, we do see a little bit of a break in the findings when we compare EV owners compared to the other type of vehicle owners. 42% of EV owners feeling that it is, in fact, they feel it's very easy. Maybe they're perceiving that there are far fewer moving parts to their vehicle. It's easy to stay on top of it. A lot of these vehicle owners actually have fairly new vehicles as well. Maybe the fact that the vehicles are new leads to this particular perception. And then you have the results for hybrid and non-electric vehicle owners there, 29 and 31% respectively, feeling that it's very easy for them to stay on top of their M&R. But that being said, this last slide is pretty telltale, and this is a finding that we've shared with audiences like yourselves over a number of years through these CBS, is the extent to which vehicle owners feel helpless or overwhelmed when they bring their vehicle in for maintenance or repair. And we see that the percent who strongly agree with that sentiment is actually much higher among EV owners at 45% compared to 38 and 31% among ICE vehicle owners. So yes, there's a sense that a lot of them do feel they're knowledgeable, feel they stay on top of everything, but despite all that, when they come into a shop, whether it be a dealership or an aftermarket, there's still a sense there among a good number of people here that they do feel helpless or overwhelmed. So there we go, a first lay of the land. A lot for you to chew on there, David. What do you think of all this? How does this all connect to what you're seeing and hearing in the industry?
Well, I think it's very accurate. I think the numbers do reflect on what we see out there in the industry. The last slide really does speak to owners that don't, they feel helpless in the sense that they understand their needs of their vehicle, but they don't understand what is required of their vehicle. And I don't know if that makes sense, but digging underneath the hood, they hear about the electronics, the computers, the complexity of the systems on the vehicle, and it can be overwhelming for them to understand that. So I think that they feel knowledgeable, definitely, that their vehicles do need service. They know how to stay on top of it. They know how to make those connections. A lot of these vehicles now have built-in maintenance reminder systems that can go right to your smartphone. But when they do bring their car in and there's services that need to be done, it's kind of overwhelming, especially when there might be a thermal management flush on the cooling, or there's upgrades that need to be done to the vehicle for software. It can be, they just might say like, yeah, just do it. I don't, it needs to be done, just do it. So, and it can be overwhelming for them for that.
Yeah, what I found, thank you for that, David, is what I found is a lot of these first four slides help service managers, they help technicians understand how to talk to their customers, right? Do they understand? It helps them understand kind of that baseline around. There's a sense of knowledge. They feel they're on top of everything, but they still feel overwhelmed across all that. So it helps them understand. Well, how much, I don't want to say spoon feeding is needed, but how much hand holding is needed. But it helps them understand a little bit the tone of the conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah, and it does come back to a lot of education. So, once again, the customer needs to be educated, when it's being done. I do find there's a lot of conversations that happen at the service level. So that's important for shop owners and technicians to get the verbal language, especially when talking to an EV or PHEV owner, even hybrid owners too, getting that language, dumbing it down, in a sense, not meaning that, in a sense that it's understandable, it's easy for them to feel confident and be able to work with that shop or the technician or so on with their vehicle needs.
Yeah. David, great findings. Thank you for your presentation, Rick. Jumping in some of the questions were released, I'm going to go where we're saying that consumers feel helpless and overwhelmed about maintenance, but would it be fair to say that it's sometimes a little similar challenge for the shop operator, shop owner? One of the questions we got, and it's for you, David, how are we going to be able to work on those EVs? How do we need to equip our shops to do this? Are there safety procedures that are needed to work on these EVs? And how do we get that information around battery information on EVs? So is it fair to say that maybe shops also are a little overwhelmed about, how do they go about to be ready to service those vehicles?
Definitely, shops feel overwhelmed. They feel intimidated by the vehicles. There's a lot of stuff out there about safety, about the high voltage systems, but we have to look back at vehicle and technology and how it's evolved over the years. It's like any other system on any other vehicle in the past, that training is paramount. Definitely understanding the systems, how they work, the procedures, the precautions, the equipment you're going to need. Those are all very definite attributes to the shop in starting to become involved with EV servicing, and getting that confidence in order to be able to work on those cars. So there's definitely, not just on the consumer side, but also on the shop and technician side. And that's why we're seeing a lot of shop owners really, engaging in training sessions that are available on high voltage safety, maintenance, repair on electric vehicles. And the battery systems are one thing in its own. I always tell shops and that or technicians to focus on the high voltage safety, focus on the service repair information, and follow through on the process and procedures. Don't worry about rebuilding batteries. I ask them, a lot of them, how many do you rebuild transmissions right now, or rebuild engines? So focus on what's needed right now, and that is the safety aspect and the understanding of how those systems work on those vehicles.
That's great, David. Rick, somewhat unrelated, but I think important because it came through some of the questions we got in advance of today's webinar. The role of government subsidies in driving those EV sales. The market penetrations of EV seems to be connected to government subsidies. Any insights you could share on that, Rick?
Sure. I don't have a ton of data around that. It's no secret, certainly in my conversations with consumers on these matters and others, that the almighty dollar goes a long way in terms of driving any sort of behaviors, and EV purchases is one of them. Well, we don't have hard sales numbers here. What we do is public opinion research or consumer research, so we get the consumers' opinions around this. But what we do see through our findings for this particular study is there is, in fact, a higher propensity to have owned a vehicle, an EV or a hybrid, in Quebec and in BC, which is, in fact, the two provinces where those subsidies exist. They do exist in Atlantic Canada as well, but I think, David, being from out there yourself, those subsidies are a little more recent, right? So maybe they haven't had that chance to really have kind of that long-term trickle-down effect on the overall market. So what's your sense of that?
Well, our subsidies came about in about 2020, and in other provinces came about 2021. So, but definitely it made an impact, a short-term impact right away. Subsidies definitely help with the sale of EVs. When we started our dealership, the minute the EV incentives came out, it definitely drove that market, and we continuously see that in other markets as well as subsidies continue. So, because of those subsidies, it does make it more attractive. It makes it a more economical decision that, that they can be, subsidized in some way for rebates back, whether it's on charging within the home or dollar amount back on the vehicle itself. So I think the subsidies are a good thing to help make the vehicles more affordable. But once again, there's only a few provinces that offer those subsidies currently.
That's great. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Rick. So we're going to move to the second sections. Before I do so, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, don't hesitate to post those through the QA tab. And again, we're going to try to get to those additional questions as well. So back to you, Rick, for the second segment.
Perfect. So our second segment, folks, is titled Perceptions of Service Providers. And it gives us here a general sense of where do vehicle owners bring their vehicles for maintenance and repair? And do they have any particular views of the aftermarket in general compared to dealerships. So we kind of put them head to head. So let's have a look at our 2 slides. They're only 2 slides, but they're actually fairly impactful. So the first one here, folks, I know there's a lot of information here. So let me walk you through this a little bit. What we did is we asked participants, well, where do you bring your vehicle for maintenance and repair? Is it exclusively a dealership? Is it both a combination of dealership and aftermarket? Or in the third column, you never go to a dealership? And you see the results across the rows. The first row would be EV owners. 45% of EV owners in our survey exclusively go to a dealership. 51% use both aftermarket and a dealership, and 4% never go to a dealership. The results are actually quite similar for your hybrid vehicle owners, which occupy that middle row. As you can see the cursor there dragging across that middle row. And then the bottom row would be your ICE vehicle owners, where the numbers are actually quite different. There, only 24%, well, almost half of the numbers of EV and hybrid owners, 26% exclusively go to a dealership, 51% use both. That number is pretty similar to everybody else. And 23% never go to a dealership. And I'm sure you all are all wondering, my goodness, what's going on? What's driving, again, no pun intended, what's driving that behavior? Well, as I indicated earlier, many of our hybrid and EV respondents are driving newer vehicles, that they still have warranties. Certainly, if they have extended warranties, they would certainly be well within that 4 or 5 year age range. So a lot of our new vehicle owners, their vehicle's about 4 or 5 years old. It's not unusual, whether it be EV or otherwise, for a lot of those vehicle owners to go to their dealership exclusively for M&R or use a combination there. The other thing is awareness. Our vehicle owners, EV vehicle owners in particular, even aware that there are some local shops in their area that take care or look after EV. We're going to touch on that in our third segment. But another key factor is, do they feel that the aftermarket can even take care of their vehicle if they were to bring it to them? And let's have a look at that next slide, which is where we get to understand that a little bit more. So here, folks, what we did in our survey, again, a very long survey, we did a head-to-head. We asked participants along a whole host of attributes. How do they feel the aftermarket compares to dealerships? How do they compare in terms of whether it be cleanliness, technical competence, value for money? There's actually a really long list there. The 3 findings I wanted to pull out of that exercise are featured here on this slide. We did an overall. We asked participants, all things considered, how do you feel dealerships compare to the aftermarket? What we see, and again, there are little icons there, help us understand who we're referring to. So the little plug being EV owners, 50% of EV owners overall feel that dealerships outperform ASPs. 23% feel that ASPs outperform dealerships. The gap in the percentages there basically means they're telling us that they perform equally well. Results are quite similar for your hybrid vehicle owners, 50% there feeling overall dealerships outperform ASPs. Results are reversed when we look at ICE vehicle owners there. There, 50% believe, all things considered, ASPs outperform dealerships compared to 36%. Now, what has historically been known is the ASP has been known for delivering good value for money. The results are certainly consistent in our most recent wave of this study here, which is the second chunk of our numbers here, value for money there across the board, actually, whether they're EV owners, hybrid vehicle owners, or ICE vehicle owners, they're all telling us, or more likely to tell us, that the aftermarket outperforms dealerships when it comes to value for money. However, the story is reversed when it comes to technical competence, when it comes to maintaining and repairing EVs specifically. There, you can see the numbers are quite stark, actually. The gap between the aftermarket and the dealerships is quite stark. EV owners, to the tune of 69% compared to 9%, believe dealerships outperform ASPs. Not as stark, but still pretty dramatic. 58% of hybrid vehicle owners believe dealerships outperform the aftermarket, and then even ICE vehicle owners, many of whom don't even use dealerships, would still, when asked about EV maintenance and repair, would still believe that the dealership would outperform the aftermarket, 44 versus 14%. So there, well, I can't help but think, and I'm looking forward to hearing David's thoughts around this, is an important barrier for electric vehicle owners, and even to some extent hybrid vehicle owners, from going to the aftermarket for their maintenance and repair. What do you think, David?
Well, I think it's a new technology, and like with anything, you do have a lot of warranty out there on the vehicles. So that becomes a challenge because once again, these vehicles are having these extended warranties. Some vehicles are already into the 240,000 kilometer powertrain warranties, we see in some of the Teslas and that. A lot of the other vehicles are hitting 160, 180. So, the warranty issue forces consumers to bring their vehicles back to a dealership for that type of work. But at the same time, because they feel that the aftermarket hasn't seen enough, like their local service shop hasn't seen enough of the vehicles, because everyone seems to be taking them back to the dealer, that they forget that the routine maintenance things, like the brake caliper servicing, brake service, tires and alignment and suspension, and if it's not under warranty, if it's had that bumper to bumper warranty, can all be done by a local service provider. And when we started All EV Canada, we shifted to that. We wanted to become the experts in EVs because a lot of dealerships weren't doing EV work back in 2019 and 20. So we actually had the upper hand in that. And but it took convincing, because once again, the consumer believed that, how do you guys, or how does the aftermarket in the sense know more, or is capable of working on an electric vehicle, when the dealerships aren't even doing it? But we're starting to see a shift there. I think training is going to be paramount. Once again, auto service providers, getting that training, more information is available, access to tools is becoming more common. So, so once again, they'll give that confidence back for, the aftermarket service centers and that, to be able to service electric vehicles beyond the tires and the brakes and so on.
Right. Fascinating findings. Thank you. David, you just mentioned about the importance of training. And one particular question we had received in advance of today's webinars is, what do you believe right now is what is the best source of training for retail chains in order to prepare to train their technicians to work safely on EVs? Any insights you could share?
Well, training is one of those things. There's lots of training out there now. It's amazing. Over the last year and a half, you struggled to find technical training on high voltage systems or vehicles in the sense of electric, and no different than even new models that are coming out with the ICE powered vehicles. But now there's training available all over. We're seeing more and more of it. It's finding the right training, the right fit for your shop, for the technicians. Depends if it's an online, hybrid, in-person, hands-on. I find the hands-on training is important because a lot of technicians are still intimidated after even watching a webinar on training high voltage system. They still have that, what happens when I pull that cover off, and I got to put the gloves on and wear my protection, and so I think that it's going to come down to the offerings of the training. Does it make sense? But like I say is, so the elephant in the room is always the battery. Look for high voltage safety training, battery repair, battery rebuilding, things like that is not as important as a high voltage safety training. Proper service disconnects, doing the dead live testing, ensuring the vehicle's safe before the technician touches it. Whether you're doing air conditioning or even doing a routine service on the vehicle, you need to make sure the technicians are safe. So make sure that training, touches on those types of things as well.
Great, thank you. So what I heard, and you said that comment earlier, David, is, few of us do in fact rebuild transmissions the same way as probably few of us will specialize in rebuilding batteries. But at its basis, making sure everyone gets some good safety training is probably a good starting point on a hearing. To you, Rick, more specific to the survey itself, was there any specific vintage of vehicle that was surveyed? So was there any questions related to the specific type of vehicle beyond the powertrain that you asked as part of the survey?
No, not in particular. We ask what kind of vehicle they own and manage at home in terms of maintenance and repair. So what vehicle are you responsible for? And that's the vehicle they spoke about for the rest throughout the rest of the survey, but we didn't focus on a particular vintage or break out the results that way.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question for David, actually. A lot of that training that you explained, David, is very specific. It would be certainly go way over the average consumer's head. I mean, how do shops communicate that? How do they let the consumers coming into their shops understand and know that they have this training, this very unique and special training?
It comes down to confidence. The way that the way the technician or this the service advisor or even any of the staff talk to the customer will know that they're confident in working on their vehicle. That's what we found. If there is a lack of communication, fumbling around in the sense of finding the right words to explain a type of repair, or even being able to bring the vehicle in, that can give a customer pretty much, like, ooh, I don't know if they're really going to be able to work on my vehicle. The biggest thing, though, we do find is social media. There's no question about it. If you're a service provider right now, and you are doing electric vehicles, find the groups, find the social media groups that are out there in your local area. There's tons of them out there, and like EV Owners Ontario, there's like Tesla owner groups, there's groups all over, and start posting it on there that when you bring a car in, you have it up on the hoist, you have a couple of wheels off, you're doing a tire swap on the vehicle, or even just a rotation on electric vehicle, and really leverage that social media, because you remember a lot of these cars are bought online, so people go online, they source the vehicle, they research it, and in some cases they're even ordering the vehicles online. So the online presence is very important for a shop to stay on top of their expertise and really demonstrate that to consumers, especially on a social media group that's in the local area, that's there's that you're offering services on electric vehicles, and and the word of mouth is gold, especially with the EV world.
One of the survey findings that we discovered as well is that a lot of the EV owners actually own two vehicles. Odds are pretty good that second vehicle is probably a traditional ICE, probably a traditional ICE, and they're probably taking that vehicle into the aftermarket. Is there an opportunity there to perhaps get some good word of mouth and kind of have a halo effect or a domino effect onto that EV ownership?
Yeah, so a lot of vehicles, a lot of owners that, yes, you're correct. A lot of people do buy, they have a second vehicle, that they may have a second vehicle that's an ICE powered vehicle, and they're already visiting a service center of some sort, and and they might even mention, hey, we just bought a new XYZ electric vehicle, and it's exciting. It's good for that shop. Said, hey, you know what? We work on electric vehicles. Like, we still can do your service. We can't do your warranty work, but hey, you need that tire rotation, you need the tire, winter tire changeover. You need your alignment done, brake caliper services, which are things that electric vehicles do need, especially in Canada. You really be able to communicate that very early while that customer is still in your shop, especially when they're already saying it. But what we do find now lately is that a lot of people are trading in their second vehicle for electric vehicles. So, there's a lot of families I know in Atlantic Canada that are now down to two EVs. So it's good to catch them early when they still have the ICE powered vehicle. But and most of those ICE powered vehicles that people have as second vehicle are usually a little older, and they're probably not taking those ones to a dealership. So that's also an opportunity to really flaunt that if you're doing EV service, that you have it. And like one of the things I tell a shop owner, I said, the best way to really make an impact that you are, ready for electric vehicles is put a charger on your building. Put a level 2 charger out there. They're not expensive, but that really does make a presence in the community, as well as makes a stance that, and then you can put it on apps like PlugShare and so on. And, now you become like, people realize that, hey, if that shop has a charger on the building, they definitely understand the electric vehicle world. So
yeah, definitely just put your name out there and be present and visible. Yeah. Fantastic. We need to move on to now the third section. Thank you for sending your questions in. We'll answer them in the third. But back to you for the final section, Rick.
Perfect. So actually, what David's been talking about in his last segment is a nice segue into this last and third segment here, which is what owners are look for in a service provider. So we have 2 or 3 slides, I think 3 slides here to shed a little bit of light on this. It goes without saying, obviously, that vehicle owners are looking for technicians, they're looking for shops to repair their vehicle. That goes without saying, but they can't bring them there if they don't know that those shops actually repair electric vehicles. So we actually took a little bit of time in our survey here to ask these EV owners who are exclusively using a dealership. We asked them, well, are you even aware that there are shops, aftermarket shops in your local area that service EVs or hybrids? And you can see here with our icon with the plug, among EV owners, 36% indicated they were aware. So awareness pretty low there. 1 out of 3 EV owners who exclusively use dealerships are aware that there are shops in their area, that aftermarket shops that service electric vehicles. That number climbs a little bit to 43%, but still, all things considered, those numbers are relatively low. So certainly the one key finding we're getting here is that there needs to be an increase in awareness among consumers. Back to that education piece that David was talking about earlier. Increase that awareness that shops in the aftermarket do actually service EVs. What we also found, as we see on our next slide, what we found through our survey results is, well, I hope everyone's sitting down, EV owners are tech savvy. I know that's a shocking finding. Probably the overstatement of the year. But yes, EV owners are tech savvy. We discovered this through a variety of questions that we have in our survey. The EV owners are more likely to be shopping online for vehicle parts and fluids. They're more likely to have heard of telematics. We actually have a whole section of our survey dedicated to in-car data. So yeah, they're more likely to be aware of telematics. They're more likely to be confident that they know or understand who has access to that in-car data. We have a little section that was a carryover from the pandemic, and we asked all vehicle owners, how important or how much do you value the opportunity to book your appointment online? Well, again, lo and behold, EV owners are more likely to value or see importance in being able to communicate with their shop and book their appointment online. All this pointing to, again, that tech savviness. And so I'm going to throw this out here, and I think David spoke a little bit to this in his last commentary, is that, well, goodness, ways in which an ASP can demonstrate technological savviness in its operations, in its customer touch points, could have, in fact, a positive impact on whether these customers feel ASPs, are technologically skilled to maintain or repair their EV or hybrid vehicle. The third slide, again, trying to understand what can ASPs do to kind of convert or bring more traffic, especially among those EV and hybrids. There's actually some measures that have a positive lift on the appeal of the aftermarket, irrespective of the type of vehicle that is owned. What we've learned through our surveys, that just, again, to that consumer education, that the more consumers understand and know about parts and part warranties, aftermarket parts and aftermarket parts warranties, the more that they understand how dealership tech advisors, service advisors, and technicians are paid, does have a positive lift on their views of the aftermarket there. So going again a little bit beyond kind of that technical competence and touching a little bit on, again, the communications and the consumer education that needs to happen to draw more customers into their base. So I'm sure, David, you have a few more nuggets, and I really liked your idea there of having a plug at the shop. Again, it's just this idea of demonstrating tech savviness and openness to servicing EVs. What do you think of all this, David?
Great. I love this. One thing I do like is, and one thing to understand as a service provider is you have to understand your customer. And Rick nailed it on the head there, talked about the tech savviness. These customers are doing a lot of research. They know what SOC is and degradation and, regeneration of regen braking and these terms that they'll use very freely because they understand them. They can read them, they can research them and so on. But as a service provider, one thing that you do need, and if you have a pen and paper, you should write this down because this is what we discovered is, first off, ICE owners bring their vehicles in. This would be on repair and routine maintenance and stuff like that. But you got to remember, an ICE owner will bring their vehicle in for two things. One is reliability and longevity. Why? Because their vehicle has many moving parts. Reliability, do the oil changes, have the vehicle checked over, change the belts, do the coolant flushes and so on. They want their vehicle to live a long life. They know that these parts wear out very quickly. It's expensive to fix them. They don't want to be broken down on the side of the road. And these are gas-powered vehicles this is inherently, the trend that's been for the last 50, 60 plus years. EV owners are a little different. What we found when we were running our shops, they don't come in for reliability and longevity. They know their cars have very few moving parts. Wear and tear on the components is very lax. It's not the same as a gas powered where it has like 3,000 to 4,000 moving parts, where you're comparing to 40, around 40, 50 parts moving. But EV owners are looking for efficiency and range. So they will come in and get their tires rotated. They want to have good tires on their vehicle. They want to keep the alignment good. They want to get that brake caliper service done so they're not dragging brakes and so on, underbelly pan cleaning and all sorts of different things that affect efficiency and range. Because the funny thing is, I ask people, I go, what kind of mileage do you get on your gas powered vehicle? And well, I don't know, I get like 500 kilometers to a tank of fuel. EV owners are a little different. That little state of charge gauge on their vehicle, they know it takes 20% to drive to work and drive home every day. The minute that goes to like 23, 24 and stays consistent, they're into your shop and they want to know why they're losing range on their vehicles. Is there a problem with the battery? Is there a problem with a sticky caliper, or is there something going on with the alignment or tires on the vehicle? So EV owners are looking at the efficiency and range that they can get out of that vehicle, where gas-powered owners, ICE-powered vehicle owners, are looking for reliability and longevity. So it's a little different what we found when that came about. But it is definitely a point to be made in understanding the customer, what they're looking for, especially when you want to capture that maintenance interval, especially on the EV side.
Awesome. David, I'd like to ask you a question, because all that leads to be prepared, have the right equipment, be properly trained. So the question we got in advance was, do you think there will ever be a certification process for a shop to be able to service EV, whether it's around equipment, training requirements, and so on? What's your take on this?
Well, I can definitely say right now, yes. Right now, CSA is working on a high voltage technician certification program. It is going to be test based. It's pretty much done. You'd probably see it coming out sooner than later. There's many SMEs working across the board on this certification. So we may see, definitely we'll see a CSA certification platform coming out within the next little while. But there's also going to be other ones out there as well too. But once again, having a certificate on the wall is great, and having the certification is great. But it comes really down to, as Rick said earlier, the rubber on the road. It comes down to being able competency, being able to perform those tasks, be able to do it safely. So once again, having the certification is great, but you have to have also the experience and those fundamentals behind you as well when you're doing that type of work.
Great, thank you. And for you, Rick, one question came in about demographics. And when you look at the results and you look at who answered owning an AEV and a hybrid, were there specific findings related to demographics you could share with us?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, there's actually an entire slide in the report, the more detailed report. I noticed in the notes there that the report will become available to everyone. But just a bit of a sneak peek around all that. The results are fairly comparable, where we do see a bit of a difference, notwithstanding the geographic difference I referred to earlier about Quebec and BC. What we are seeing is that the EV and hybrid owners do tend to be slightly older. They are more likely to own two vehicles. They are more likely to earn a higher income, more likely to be higher educated. A lot of those things are correlated. We do know that higher education typically leads to higher income, and higher income typically leads to, higher age typically leads to higher income. It's not a golden rule, but it's typically how demographics align here in Canada. And those are the groups that are more likely to be owning EVs and hybrids. A little bit more women, in fact, on the EV side. So 56% versus 44% men of EV. So, you know, it slants a little bit female, higher education, higher household income, more likely to own a couple of vehicles. And certainly the age of the vehicle is lower. The average age among ICE vehicle owners in our survey was about 9 years. Among EV and hybrid vehicle owners, it's 4 to 5 years.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rick. And I guess a good segue to say, you know, please go visit the website and download the entire report. Will be made available tomorrow. I'd like to now move to our general Q&A, encouraging you to post some of your questions in the QA tab. But we already have a couple questions. One came, it says, while there are incentives to purchase an EV, do you anticipate provinces following Saskatchewan with a surcharge to replace the gas tax for EV owners? And it all speaks to, I guess, the dynamics around the subsidies versus taxes. What would be your take on this, David?
I don't know much about that. I hear a lot about the taxing of gas. You know, obviously, electric vehicles don't use gasoline, so it comes down to, you know, who pays for the road tax, and, you know, the subsidies that are out there and how they're going to be offset is a really interesting point. But I think currently, with the amount of EVs on the road, is very low still, and the percentages are very low. So I think over time, we may see some changes, you know, maybe just like I can't speak for the problem, but I know in Nova Scotia, when I register my vehicles based on weight, and that's how I pay my my sticker for my plates every 2 years. So obviously heavier vehicles have a higher charge for relicensing my vehicle, and the lighter ones are not. So, but yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with that for sure.
Yeah. And David, I could share probably from an AIA perspective, and it probably answers another question we had to receive in advance, which says, does Canada have the infrastructure to allow them to hit their EV goals? And, you know, there's a lot of debate right now about how fast we're going to get there. I think nobody here is going to debate whether or not, you know, we're going to see the EV transition. It's coming. There's strong commitment and legislation that says by 2035, all new vehicles sold in Canada have to be zero-emission vehicles. So it's not a question of if, but a question of when. And on that particular topic, I know automakers specifically have put out some questions about how fast can we actually transition the infrastructure around charging. And, you know, tied to this is the whole funding model. And so I encourage people to visit the road-to-2035.ca. I'll put in the chat, road-to-2035.ca. It's a website that's been produced by automakers to say, hey, this is, you know, our goal, but are we able to have the infrastructure? So yeah, there are questions around the impact of subsidies, the impact of regulations and legislations that are going to shape that. But we are clearly seeing a growing number of people that are making the transitions to EV. And I always says it's the tale of the two Canada. Some provinces are clearly ahead of others, and the subsidies are clearly playing a role in this. But it will continue to expand from our perspective. David, back to you. Other than the battery having to be replaced eventually, what are the other major components you think we're going to see failing on EVs over time?
It's just like a regular vehicle. Like EVs are no different than a regular traditional vehicle in the sense of all their components on the vehicle. So we're going to still see their suspension and tires and so on. Are EVs harder on suspension components? Currently, we see more wear on suspension components. I know I do a few clinics on maintenance on EVs and what to watch for and so on. And you know, you really do have to concentrate. Even low mileage EVs, don't discount them for having issues with bushings or, you know, ball joints and stuff like that. You know, that extra weight that's, you know, hanging underneath the vehicle, it could be up to over 1,000 pounds. So it can have a little bit more wear and tear on the suspension components, especially on vehicles that are sharing the same platform from an ICE vehicle to an EV. So, you know, sometimes they share the exact same suspension components, steering components, which could have faster wear on them. But, you know, and that's, you know, but I can't say that, we're going to see failures in inverters or chargers, onboard chargers, and so on. And and one of the things is it's really interesting. People are always talking about the battery, replacing the battery. The batteries are based on cycle time. So a typical EV battery currently is about 1,500 to about 2,500 cycles. And that's a full charge to discharge if the car gets in and around an honest 350 to 400 kilometers of actual driving range. You times that by 2,000, that car is not going to last that long. That battery will outlast the car. And so, so once again, the batteries are not as big of an issue as the regular vehicle components that still need to be maintained in order to have that longevity of that vehicle. So.
Great. Thank you. Rick, another question here. Do customers see EVs as the predominant passenger vehicle type of the future?
That's a really interesting question. I think the best way for me to kind of answer that is that historically consumers have been a little conflicted. On the one hand, there's no denying it's for years now, there are all sorts of research that demonstrate that Canadians value the environment. Again, big shocker, right? We value it's something that we're proud of here in Canada. It's something that we're well viewed for internationally is our environment, the vast amounts of trees and beautiful lakes and so on and so forth. So there's no denying that Canadians value their environment, and they value any sort of initiative that will sustain, if not improve, that environment over the short, medium, and long term. And one of those practices has been to use and shift towards EVs. Consumers want to shift towards EVs. However, what tends to happen is that life happens. Things like, global pandemics happen, inflation happens, the price of gas happens. All sorts of factors happen that will present as particularly important challenges for your average consumer to go out there and get an EV and kind of fulfill their dreams of a green future. So the almighty dollar has an important impact there. So that is probably in some ways where BC and Quebec, where subsidies are available, where we're seeing a little bit more lift there, the dollar goes a long way. But other things in life are having that impact on consumers. Other priorities come out. So yes, I want to save the environment, but I need to be able to put food on the table. I need to keep my job. Heck, to be able to put food on the table, I need to have 2 or 3 jobs. The gig economy. There are all sorts of things that are happening out there that are representing important challenges there. Now, as we've been talking about already, the shift towards that need to sell zero emission vehicles in what is in fact the medium term, that will obviously get consumers' attention. But still, it's not an easy step for a lot of consumers to take. What ends up happening too, Jean-Francois, in people's minds is that as a consumer, I feel I'm already doing a lot to save the environment. I recycle, I take my bike to work, and a lot of things like that. So what it ends up happening is a lot of consumers, in order to save the environment, turn their attention to big business, to industry. They feel, well, us as consumers, there's only so much we can do. So, hey, well, what are all of these manufacturers doing? What are all of these fleet operators doing? What are all of these what is Big Business Canada doing to save the environment? So it does lead to a very interesting conversation with the average consumer around where they see the future going, in terms of saving their environment, protecting their environment, and what their role is specifically, and where EVs figure into all of that.
Absolutely. We did receive a lot of questions that related to regulation, the role of AIA to advocate to ensure we continue to have access to the information needed to fix DAVs. Some question talked about the whether or not in the case of EVs, not having an EV serviced by the OEM would void warranty if it's not serviced by the dealership. And so I'm trying to wrap this all around the answer of essentially AIA continues to advocate for both their mechanical and collision representative and members. There is a movement to ensure that the consumer continues to have the right to choose where to get their car serviced, and specifically ensuring that the car makers continue to be required to provide the information that's needed to properly fix these vehicles. And so this is always a moving target, but we are advocating to various levels of government. There's some recent movement on that front. Stay posted for more news on that. But in the meantime, we're continuing also to represent our industry through various bodies of the government who talk about infrastructure, who talks about how do we make sure the government deploy the infrastructures in all of Canada to ensure we could reliably use EVs on our roads. So stay posted for more news on that. To you, David, specifically on the operation, I think you've touched a bit on that earlier, but any additional business insurance concerns? What do you have to do as a business if you are going to be servicing EVs in terms of being, liable? We've talked about safety already, but what about the liability front and insurance coverage for a shop owner? Anything you could share on that would be great.
Well, first off, electric vehicle, gasoline has more energy density than an electric vehicle's battery. So once again, getting away from the stigma that an electric vehicle is more dangerous in the sense of it's sitting there and bursting into flames, I guess would be the thing. But as a shop owner, it's important to know that having safe work practices 100%. Jobs that are being done within the shop should have some sort of protocol, especially around safe work practices, depending on the work that's being done. Now, mind you, if it's just a tire rotation, stuff like that, alerting people in the shop, other technicians, especially if it's a drive-through shop, these vehicles are silent and so on. Insurance based on region, where you're at. I know with our shop, we are fortunate. We were a full electric vehicle shop. We didn't do any gas. Our rule was anything over or anything under 200 volts. We stayed away from, meaning that even in some cases, some of the mild hybrids of the BAS systems in the early days of the Malibus and so on. But and it really helped us because we were able to, insurance company we didn't really notice the increased costs if we were servicing electric vehicles or if we were even servicing gasoline powered vehicles. So I know consumers have said that buying an electric car, their insurance has gone down in price. So, and I know there's some incentives by insurers as well to push that forward onto electric vehicle owners that they have a cheaper insurance rate, part of the green funds and so on. So, but preparing a shop is really, it's, making sure you have the safety protocols in place, you have proper safety equipment, and you have the training as well for the technicians. Don't just start bringing in cars and, pushing off work onto them that they might not be familiar with, and somebody could get hurt very quickly. So.
Great. Thank you, David. One final question we got from the Q&A is, based on your research, I guess it will be for you, Rick, based on your research, what are the main roadblock to EV adoption? Is it a cost, a charging network? Not sure if we did explore that, Rick.
Yeah, we actually didn't explore that in this particular study, Jean-Francois. All I can say is I can speak anecdotally to some of the other research we've done over the years, whether it's for other for government departments, for instance, who are trying to understand consumer behaviors around this. Historically, it's been, I guess, perceptions around whether or not that it's the reliability of electric vehicles has been an important barrier, right? So individuals who like to drive powerful vehicles, there was a perception there that EVs couldn't deliver that for them. Individuals who drive long distances on a regular basis are also a little skeptical about being fully serviced by an EV. So again, they're a reliability component. The cost of EVs historically has been particularly high, which is again the almighty dollar speaking volumes there. There were concerns in parts of the country that, well, can EVs perform in deep weather? What if I'm stuck in a snowstorm in Abitibi-Témiscamingue? Is this going to be able to get me out of this snowstorm? And there was one more thing. There seemed to be another one. Now I've forgotten it. But those tended to be the kind of the main concerns or the main barrier. Oh, and availability of charging stations. Sorry, I mean, the obvious one that again historically has been a deterrent to a lot of people. David, have you heard of any other kind of perhaps anecdotally of barriers to people adopting EVs?
Yeah, and I think you got a good points there, Rick. And but I would say yes and yes to that question. I've been involved with over 500 EV sales when we owned our dealerships there. And anyways, and what happens is the cost is upfront costs. actually operational cost is a lot less with EVs over the period of time. So, but the upfront cost is a big deterrent. The incentives do help with that cost, and secondly is the charging infrastructure. And part of the education is that 95 to 98% of your charging will be done at home. So your charging fuel station is right on your own property. When you do travel, that Rick mentioned, there is charging infrastructure for long distance driving is, sometimes it's a little more difficult. There's not enough chargers. There's more EVs than chargers. And so sometimes that can be a challenge. But just recently, I drove from Halifax to Quebec City, Ottawa, Ottawa to Toronto, Toronto back to Quebec City, back to Halifax. And, it cost me, because I'm a little stringent, I stay at hotels that have free charging and stuff. It cost me less than $100 to do over 3,000 kilometers. So, and I had no issues with infrastructure and charging, and didn't even notice it actually. But the thing is that these are barriers, and like Rick said, performance of these EVs, they're incredible performing vehicles, even right from the Nissan Leaf right up to the Tesla Plaid, as we see some of these supercars now that are so when people drive the electric vehicles, they drive them, they're excited, they perform well, and just like back in the 1911 1912, when Henry Ford's wife drove an electric vehicle right till 1932, and she drove it for the same reasons of today's electric vehicles. They were easy to drive, they were reliable, and they performed very well. So so there you go.
Well, what a great way to close. You can't believe, gentlemen, but we're already at the end. This was a phenomenal webinar, great information and insight. I want to thank you, Rick and David, for your great participation. For all of you online, again, you can download the report through our website, available tomorrow. We're also going to have an executive summary of that report, which is free also for non-member. Looking forward to hear your opinion on this webinar through the survey that you're going to get very shortly. So please provide us the feedback so we could make better webinar down the road. Keep in mind, this is the second report on this consumer behavior series, so we have more coming. Please check the research calendar on our website for some of the report release dates. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoy. I'd like to thank you very much. And again, until next time, well, take care.